Okay.
Okay. So, all right. So I'm going to start the recording right now. So then it kind of starts right now. And it's going to record onto my computer. As soon as the class is over, it'll process, and then I'll have to process it up to a YouTube channel, and then I can send you the link. So so you can go back and watch everything from this point forward that we're going to be going through. I will check, because Intuit may give us some kind of deal, and I haven't looked at that either. So I thought Robin had that, but
yeah, it's not like a promo code. It's like, so a pro advisor gets directly from Intuit.
Right.
So 50% off, and then you turn around and bill your clients. So if you have like a tax preparer that you're using, they might be able to offer you the deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then Evelyn probably has a question about converting her. Did you put anything in your Quicken, Evelyn?
I downloaded the my bank accounts, and then I actually called Quicken, and they told me I should call my bank and have my bank and dispute the charge, which I thought was kind of odd. Like, why can't you just upgrade me? I'll give you the whatever money I owe and just upgrade me. So I went through the whole process of calling my bank, because that's what they told me to do, and they went through the whole dispute thing, and then came back saying, oh, that, you know, there's no reason to dispute this charge.
Yeah, that sounds
and I thought that's how it would come out. I was like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, that's weird that they told you to dispute the charge instead of just issuing you a refund. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all, because a disputed charge is for, like, if they weren't supposed to bill you when they did, and you had signed up for something. So that doesn't make sense to me why they would tell you that. But so I don't work with Quicken at all. I haven't, as far as I know, there's not like an easy way. If you were working with QuickBooks Desktop, there is an easy way to upgrade you to pull your information in, but Quicken is a whole different software. So you'd probably have to do a Google search for an app that's been created for this problem.
Okay.
But more than likely, so you said you pulled all your bank information in. Did you already categorize everything?
No, that's all I did was pull it in.
It doesn't matter, because it hasn't done anything yet anyway. So you could just set up QuickBooks Online and connect your bank accounts and then pull everything in for you too.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. Okay. I knew we needed to talk to the expert on this. I'm like, I know about technology, but I don't know about the various Intuit products and how they work so much. So this is why, and it's a great segue, why I have somebody like Robin, who is our instructor today. And I want to thank you and those who will be viewing this later for allowing us to cancel. Robin was pretty darn sick, and so she's back amongst the living, it looks like. So that's great. So I wanted to take a moment and introduce you to the Small Business Development Center where I work. My name is Kim Sherman-Labrum, and I am a counselor and the training coordinator for the Region 3 SBDC. And we are a service that is housed at Boise State University, and we provide free one-on-one confidential consulting to small business owners. So if you're having problems with, marketing or startups or hiring or transitioning out or financials, you can come to us and sit down with one of our consultants and get some training, get some mentoring, lists of resources, those kinds of things. So again, that part of our service is free. We also have training that we do, and some of it we do in-house, meaning I do it or one of my colleagues does it, but some of it we outsource to people like Robin, who is a CPA in the area meaning Boise. I know Evelyn and Rex were in McCall when this was scheduled originally. Do you guys have a home up there, or did you just happen to be there?
We happen to be there. We don't have one yet, but we are planning on that.
Excellent. It's a good plan. So anyhow, so Robin does, she's a CPA here in the Boise area, and she's kind enough to teach online QuickBooks for me a few times a year. So with that, I am going to bow out, and I'm going to mute myself, and I'm also going to turn my camera off if it lets me. I'm the host, so it may not let me. If that's the case, then I'll probably go elsewhere and meet with my client. I have a client meeting here in a half an hour. So, and you don't need me. So anyhow, Robin, take it away.
Okay, perfect. So like she said, I'm Robin Bucklew. I'm a certified public accountant and QuickBooks Online expert. So I do have my own bookkeeping business where I work with small businesses every day. And then I also teach. So I actually have an e-course that teaches bookkeepers how to become bookkeepers and start a business from scratch. So Evelyn, since you're unmuted, I just wanted to ask really quick, since you're here live, what you guys are looking for out of this workshop, and maybe, you know, if do you have a small business, is that why you're learning the QuickBooks? So I can kind of tailor it to what you need.
Okay, so Rex and I have a couple rental properties, and you know, we manage them ourselves, and so I really wanted to get a little bit better about keeping tabs on my expenses and my income and everything, and also for tax purposes. And Rex also has his own handyman type business, which is, you know, separate from the other business. And are you unmuted now? Can you hear?
I can hear.
Oh, good. Okay.
Perfect.
So he can tell you more about that.
Okay.
But my question is, for the purposes that I told you, I don't know for sure which one of the QuickBooks would be best for me, but you're gonna help me with that, right?
I am.
Good.
Okay, so what I'm going to have both of you do, unless you have something else that you want to add, Rex, I'm going to have both of you mute yourselves, because otherwise on the recording it doesn't work very well when three of us are unmuted. It makes background noises, so I just want to make sure the recording is good for the people who are catching this on the replay. So, okay, perfect. So I'm going to jump right into your question. So one of the first things that we always look at here is the pricing for QuickBooks Online. So if you have an accountant or a bookkeeper that you are working with, we get different pricing than the general public. So a pro advisor can get 50% off the life of an essentials or plus subscription. So that's this option and this option here. So if you do work with a bookkeeper, not all of them will pass through the full discount. They might offer you 30% off or something, but just know it's out there. So there are options to get a reduced price on your subscription. So as far as which edition you need, so there's Simple Start, Essentials, and Plus. There's also a new subscription called Advanced, which is under Scale Up, and you should not need that. That's if you need like 25 users and you're using it to run a much bigger business. So most people are fine starting with Simple Start. So Simple Start is the cheapest solution here, and it doesn't have all of the features, but it has enough to get you started. I do not ever recommend self-employed. So there is an even lower option from Simple Start called QuickBooks Self-Employed, and they kind of market that to freelancers, but the problem with that is that if you ever need to upgrade, it doesn't transfer over. So if you start on self-employed and you later want to upgrade to Simple Start or Essentials, you start over. It does not bring over any of your data or any of your historical categorization. So I never recommend self-employed. It's just a little bit too bare bones for most of my clients. So Simple Start, you can start with that one and track your income and expenses. You can send invoices. The only time that you need to upgrade to Essentials is when you need to add any of these features. So if you are going to start entering bills in QuickBooks and then printing checks to pay, or using QuickBooks Payments to create an ACH payment to your vendor, then you can upgrade to the next level. Also, if you need more users or to track time. You only need to upgrade to the Plus account if you need more users, if you want to do project costing, which for you guys with the rentals, I'm going to tell you a different way to do it that you don't have to upgrade, so it saves you some money. It's just a different way that we set up the chart of accounts for rental properties. And then you can, if you need inventory. So if any of you are e-commerce sellers now, I would not recommend the inventory module to anyone in QuickBooks. I just don't like it personally. I find that when it makes an error, it's really, really hard for a small business owner to get that fixed. So there are better apps out there if someone needs an inventory app that will integrate with QuickBooks Online and make it easier for you. So those are your options. So as far as you guys, my recommendation would be to start with Simple Start. It should have everything that you need, and then I'll walk you through how you would set up your chart of accounts to make that work for your rental business. Okay, so This file that you're looking at right now, this is Intuit's sample file that's available online. So this isn't one of my clients or anything like that. So if you did want to mess around with QuickBooks Online and test things out, you can go to this website, and it's just qbo.intuit.com/redir/test drive. So I'm not going to let that open because it'll kick me out of this one. But if you're watching the recording, you now have the URL so you can log in and practice. So this is what QuickBooks Online will look like when you sign in. Now, for those of you who have just set up a brand new account, you will need to go to banking and add your bank accounts. Oh, it kicked me out because I went to it. Hold on one second. It does not like when you open multiple files. I'm just going to reopen this really quick. Okay. And if we go to banking, this is where you can connect your bank account. So it will automatically pull in transactions from all of your connected bank accounts for you. And then in the future, you can just click on update once you've connected the accounts for any new transactions that have cleared the bank account to get pulled into QuickBooks. It's important to note that these transactions have not been recorded in QuickBooks. So just like in your Quicken account, until you actually go through these transactions and add them or match them or transfer them, they're just stuck here in limbo. So they're not affecting any of your financial statements. They're not pulled in. They're just sitting here ready to be categorized. So you want to connect all of your bank accounts. When you first log in, Intuit will make it obvious. It'll say, hey, connect an account once you click on the banking tab. But if you need to add future accounts, there's a button right here, it's green, that says add account, and you can just click on that. Now I can't demonstrate in the sample file what that will look like for you, but when you click on add account, it will bring up a picture with several different banks and a search box for you to type in your bank's URL. So you search for your bank and then you log in just like you would to online banking. You're going to enter a username, you're going to enter a password, and we'll pull up your bank account. Then it'll ask you which accounts do you want to connect. So if you have both personal and business accounts connected to a single login, that's okay. You can actually tell it, just accounts A, B, and C, I want to connect to QuickBooks, and it'll do that. Once you've connected the bank accounts, it'll pull in some of the historical transactions, but it doesn't pull in everything. So typically we'll pull in the last 90 days. So if you have to pull in older transactions, let's say we're starting right now and you guys are trying to do your 2019 tax return, and so you need 2019 in QuickBooks, you will have to log into your bank account directly and export a CSV file. So not an Excel file, a CSV file of your banking transactions. So most banks make it pretty straightforward how to download the transactions. You're just going to log into your bank, choose the bank account you want, tell it the dates. So it's important to get the dates in there, like 1/1 through 12/31, and then export that to a CSV file. Once you've done that, you can click on this drop-down arrow next to update and instead choose File Upload. So your CSV file must have 3 columns. It can have extra columns, but as a minimum, it has to have a column for the date, a column for the description, and a column for the amount. So again, that's a date, a description, and an amount. Once you have your spreadsheet with those 3 columns, you can click on File Upload, and then it'll ask you what file do you want to upload, and you'll upload the file. And then it will ask you which accounts to map to. So the first thing it'll say is, which column is the date? And so you'll look at your spreadsheet and you'll have your 3 columns, and your column will probably be named date, and so you'll say date. It'll say which column is the description, and you tell it which column is the description. The only area that can be tricky is if your bank, for some reason, has 2 columns for amount. So most bank accounts, I actually don't have a single client who we have 2 columns to deal with. Most bank accounts will have a single column for the amount, and they'll have positive and negative numbers in that column. If your bank has 2 columns, there's a little toggle button when you're in there importing the file where you'll just say my bank has 2 columns, and then you'll map out which column is money in and which column is money out. So once you go through and click next and upload the file, it will look just like this. So again, it'll import them the exact same way that it does by connecting your bank feeds. We just had to do it manually. So now, once you see all of these transactions here, let's talk about what that means. So these are like the biggest tips that I can give you for how to not make mistakes in QuickBooks Online is to understand what the different colors mean. So when you see under this category or match column, black writing, so see how uncategorized income is written in black? That means QuickBooks has absolutely no idea what the transaction is, so do not trust it. It's guessing. It is plugging an account. It means nothing. So black writing, do not enter that. You need to open it and edit the transaction. So the way that we can do that is just by clicking anywhere on the line. So when I clicked on the line, see how the transaction details now, it expanded so I can see. So I can see the bank detail says books by Bessie. The bank detail is copied here in the memo. I can make sure that my vendor is correct, that it's books by Bessie, but you'll notice this account is wrong because in QuickBooks, you should never have anything categorized to uncategorized because that by default, it means that you didn't categorize it. So all you would have to do is click the drop-down arrow here and choose what expense account makes sense. So if we bought books by Bessie, that could be either personal or for this business, maybe it was training and development or continuing education. So if the expense account that you need is not listed, let's say this is the first time Books by Bessie has been used and we need to put in a new account for continuing education. At the very top of almost every drop-down menu is the option to add new. So if we click on add new, I can create the account I need without ever leaving the bank feed center, which is great. So this brings us to the account listings. And before we go too much further, I'm going to get into some of the not as fun, but accounting lingo that you guys will need to know to properly navigate QuickBooks Online. So if I click this drop-down arrow, there are several account types listed. And you can think of an account type as a big bucket. So this is the big bucket that my transactions can be recorded into. And these buckets are broken out by what type of account they are. So accounts receivable is money owed to you from customers. So that's a very specific account. It's already set up by default in QuickBooks Online, so you don't have to create a new accounts receivable account. It'll already be there. So for example, for you guys with a rental, if you guys were to send invoices to your renters for some reason out of QuickBooks, you could create the invoices and those invoices would create a balance in accounts receivable. So it would track the money owed to you from your renters. If we click on one of the account types, you can see examples of what would be under that account type under detail type. So every different account type that I select will update what the detail type options are. So if I click on the account type of bank, it'll show me checking, money market, savings, trust account. So if you're not sure where something goes, you can play in here. You can click on these different account types to see, well, what's an other asset? And QuickBooks Online will give you ideas for what an other asset is, what a fixed asset is. So it's very, very helpful in that way. So again, accounts receivable, money owed to you from customers. Other current assets are not as frequently used, but maybe you might track inventory. If you have payroll, you might have employee cash advances, or if you pay for business transactions on your personal account. So let's say that you are buying property for one of these rentals or something and you paid on a personal card. If you are going to pay yourself back from the business for that transaction, you might do that as one of the, well, you'll do it as an other current liability, one of the loans. If it's the opposite, if you guys accidentally purchased a personal transaction on the business account, and so if the business is going to, if you're going to pay it back for the personal transaction that you recorded, you might do that as a loan to stockholder or loan to officers because those are you guys. So if you're going to pay it back, you'll want to use one of the loan accounts. It's an asset for the business if it's money that you personally need to owe back to the business, or it's a liability for the business if it's money that the business owes you because you paid on a personal account. So those options are here if you need to record them. Under bank, you have the different accounts. So we have cash on hand, checking, savings, money market, which you may use. Fixed assets, again, will be a relevant one for those of you with the rental properties because you may be purchasing furniture if you have furnished rentals, for example, or the buildings themselves. So if your business is buying up properties, then a building is a fixed asset. So what I personally do with my rental properties is I create a fixed asset, I create buildings, and then I change the name to the property address. So if I purchase a property at 123 Dinehart Lane in McCall, I'm going to make that the name of my fixed asset. So it's really easy for me to keep track of which asset I'm putting, additional purchases to when I'm capitalizing. So you can choose the detail type, but you always have the option to update the name. So this is for you. So put names that are relevant to you, that when you look at your financial statements, you'll know what they mean. Okay. So other types that we have in here, we have accounts payable, which is the opposite of accounts receivable, right? So AR is money owed to you. Accounts payable is bills that you owe to a vendor. We have credit cards. So if you connect a credit card, make sure you select the account type credit card or it will not pull incorrectly. We have other current liabilities. So if you have a line of credit that you're using to finance some additional purchases or to pay for repairs and maintenance on these units, then you might want to set up a line of credit in here or a loan payable. So these are the typical accounts that you're going to see and use in your business. And again, the difference between an other current liability and a long-term liability is how soon do you expect to pay it back. So a current liability you expect to pay within a year. A long-term liability is going to take more than a year to pay. The equity account, this is the difference between your assets and your liabilities, or it's your investment in the business. So it's your share of the business here. So if you purchase anything, again, if you purchase anything for the business on a personal account or vice versa, you accidentally run a personal charge through a business account, if you're not going to turn around and move the money to either pay yourself back or pay the business back, you can code all of those transactions to the owner's equity account. So handle anything personal through either a loan or owner's equity, and the way that you choose which one is based on what you intend to do. Okay, so then we have income accounts. So income is the earnings from what we're in business to do. So in your case, that might be rental income. And again, QuickBooks will offer you some generic income names like service or fee income. For rental properties, if you don't want to upgrade to Plus and use class tracking, I will name my rental income based on the property. So I might have 123 Dinehart Lane revenue. And then I track so that way I have a single revenue line for each property that I own. And the reason why I do that is because I also do the same thing on the expenses side. I will have an expense parent category for 123 Dinehart Lane, and all the expenses relevant to that will roll up into that one expense account. So then I can look at my revenue and my expense for a single property and calculate my profit on one property if I'd like to. So that's my recommendation when you're working with the chart of accounts. And since we're a small group and we're practicing, I will just show you what that would look like. So Lane. And I actually am going to make this a sub-account of, so first I'm going to do rental income as a parent account. So I just typed in the name I want. And then when you see these green buttons with a drop-down arrow, that means you have options. So if you click the drop-down, I'm going to choose Save and New because I don't want this to close. I want to add another account. So I'm clicking Save and New. I'm going to do another income account. And this time, I'm going to make my rental property account. So Dinehart Lane, and it's going to be a sub-account of rental income. And when we get to the financial statements, I'll show you what this looks like and why I do it this way. Also, just quickly going to demonstrate how I would set up the expense categories for this situation. So I'm going to choose a new expense account type, and expenses are money paid basically to earn the income. So it's reasonable expenses that we had to incur to be in business. There's not necessarily always going to be a good detail type that fits with what we're doing. So I'm just creating a parent account. So none of these are really relevant. So it doesn't matter which one you pick sometimes because we're still going to customize the name over here. So I'm going to make this 123 Dinehart expenses. And I'm going to do one more account just as a demonstration. So I'm going to do one more expense account, and we're going to track utilities for this rental property. And so I'm going to make utilities a sub-account of 1, 2, 3 Deinhard expenses. So this is just the setup phase, and then I'll show you what that'll look like on your P&L. So that way you can use an Essentials QuickBooks Online account to do the same things that other people are using a Plus account to do. Okay. So for Books by Bessie, oh, I didn't create the account that we would use for that, but let's just choose one of our current expense accounts. So whatever expense account makes sense, we can scroll down the list to see all of our options. So I'm just going to keep scrolling until I hit expenses. And I'm just going to say that Books by Bessie was an advertising expense. Maybe it was a book teaching me how to advertise, and that's where I'd like to categorize it. When you click on add means the transaction is brand new to QuickBooks. So if you are manually creating transactions in QuickBooks, and what I mean by that is if you are writing checks or recording things manually, you do not want to add a transaction you've already recorded, because add is going to create a brand new transaction. The other actions that you might see under here are match. Match means that you have entered a transaction manually in QuickBooks, and now Intuit believes that it's found its match that cleared the bank account. So notice for match, it's saying, hey, here is this record that I found in QuickBooks. You entered a deposit on 1/11 for $868.15. Well, that same amount just came through the bank feeds on 1/11. We think that's the same. So that's what Intuit is telling you when they say one record found. It's typically matching off the dollar amount, so it doesn't always distinguish between the date. So if it was trying to match to this and there had been other deposits for that same amount that hadn't cleared from a year ago, QuickBooks will still try to match to that really old transaction that's probably not accurate. So you always want to click to expand the detail and make sure that the date makes sense with the transaction if you have multiples of the same amount. Okay, so I'm going to click match on this one. So we've gone through add and we've gone through match. So let's talk about more of these items here. So if the writing is green, which right now we don't have any green ones, so I am going to create one. So let's see if we have any duplicate pays. So a rental, I am going to create this transaction really quickly. So the vendor doesn't exist, but I can see that it's A1 rental and backhoe. So I am just going to type in the name that I want for my vendor. Click add. So again, QuickBooks makes it really easy. If you don't have a vendor, you don't have an account, you can add it from whatever screen that you're on. You don't have to go somewhere else and create the vendor first. It's important to note, so this one is showing money received, which is why it's defaulting to a customer type. However, because I can see that there are multiple transactions to A1 rental that were actually expenses, this is probably just a refund of a previous transaction. So I am going to change this from a customer to a vendor. So you can do that right here from the type. Now it's important to choose the correct customer or vendor option. You cannot move them later. So if I created A1 rental backhoe on accident as a customer, I can't turn around and create A1 rental backhoe as a vendor. I have to change the name just a little bit for it to work. So I might have to put a period at the end of backhoe to create the vendor. And then you can move all of the transactions over, but that customer will always be there. So it's important to make sure that you do it correctly the first time, because you can't just switch it later. And again, when you're doing this in your own books, you're gonna know what the transactions are that are coming through. So you're gonna know intuitively, was that a vendor or a customer? So if you're wondering how I'm picking these from the example file, it's just because I've worked in this example file before, so I already knew that was a refund. Okay, so once we put in our vendor, you can add more details if you would like. So if you click on add details, this is what the vendor screen looks like. And so you may want to add an address. You may have a contact at the company whose name and email you want to put in, or their phone number. Also, you may have a subcontractor that you need to issue 1099s for at year end. So if you are working with subcontractors, which a lot of property managers do work with subcontractors for landscaping or cleaning, flipping the units, things like that, you can click this box for track payments for 1099, and then you need to enter in either their EIN or their social security number in this field. And then my recommendation is, before you ever pay a 1099 contractor, make them give you their W-9 first, because later it will be a struggle. So get their W-9 and you can attach it right here in QuickBooks Online and then hit save. By doing that, when it's time to run the 1099s and e-file out of QuickBooks, that contractor is already set up. Their information will pull through so you can easily e-file. Okay, so we've created the new vendor, and I am going to pick an expense category here for equipment rental. The reason I'm choosing an expense category for the refund is that we always code a refund to the same account that we're going to record the initial transaction. So a purchase from A1 Rental Backhoe is for equipment rental, so I'm coding the refund to the same account to make the net balance in my expense account correct. Okay, so I'm clicking add, again, brand new transaction, and what I'm hoping is that by doing that, let me try with this vendor here. I put in equipment rental. What should happen if QuickBooks is working correctly is when I save this, the other transaction should turn green. Okay, see how now the words are written in green? So when the words are written in green, what that means is the last time you had this payee pull into QuickBooks, that's the account you used. So it makes it easier for us to add transactions because we can see, hey, every time I code something to A1 Rental, I've been coding it to this equipment rental account. It's already there, it's already pulled it in. So if that's still correct, then we can just go ahead and add the transaction. So it saves you some time knowing that green writing means you used this account last time. So some transactions might match to multiples, again, because of the amount. So for this transaction here, I clicked on the line to expand the details. And so we can see that the bank details shows Pam is the payee, and we can see that only one of these expenses is Pam. So this is where QuickBooks makes it really, really easy for you to mess up. If you don't expand the detail and choose the correct transaction to match it to, you're gonna have issues in QuickBooks. So again, always compare the bank detail to which transaction it's trying to match to and make sure that you've selected the right button. So in this case, selecting the expense for Pam before we click match. So we're matching to the correct transaction. Never just trust that QuickBooks has it right. Okay, so this is the Bank Feed Center, and right now we are in the all column. If you want to get faster at entering in transactions, I like to start with the recognized column here. And what's going to pull through in recognized, well, sorry, it's giving us a tour now. What's going to pull through in recognized will be transactions that QuickBooks has either matched or that we've used the account before. So for these transactions, they're quicker to review because you're more than likely they're matching correctly, and so you can go through and get all of these entered quickly. Some other menu items to touch on up here. So let's say that we have transactions and we want to modify a bunch of them at once. So let's find some that don't match to anything. So for example, Mahoney Mugs, I'm going to click on, and Tim Phillip Masonry, just for an example. If I click on these little boxes, I can now click on my drop-down arrow for batch actions, and I can modify them at the same time. So granted, normally you're going to be modifying if you have 10 of the same vendor and you want to update their information. You can change the payee all at once, and you can change the category. So if I want to change this category to fuel, for example, I can click apply and add, and that will automatically update the transactions and add them to QuickBooks Online. So again, the batch action tool is neat because it lets you do things, a bunch of things at the same time instead of doing them one by one. Other things you can do, let's say you are trying to catch up all of last year and it's overwhelming to see all those transactions here in the bank feeds. If you click on this filter, you can show which dates you want. So if you just want to start with January and go 1 month at a time, you can set the filter right here to be just those dates, and then you don't have everything showing in your bank feeds. Other items, this is the printer icon. You'll see that all throughout QuickBooks, so anytime you want to print, click on the printer icon. This is your export icon. So it'll give you an option if it's available to export to Excel or a PDF, and it'll tell you which one it is. So right now, this I could export to Excel if I wanted to. And then this is the gear icon, and the gear icon always indicates settings. So again, another piece of very valuable advice for you is always make sure the box to copy bank detail to memo is checked every single time. And then I always click the box for show bank details. So the reason you want to copy the bank detail to the memo is if you make a mistake and you've got the memo there that shows who you should have categorized the transaction to, that is much easier than having a transaction with no details that you're not sure why you coded it to a payee, and you have to go into your bank, pull the transaction to look at the detail to then recategorize. So save yourself some time. Just make sure that the bank detail is always copied to the memo. Okay, so if we want to toggle between the various accounts we have connected, all you have to do is click on them, and that will pull up the transactions that are waiting in that other account. You can also look at these various tabs here. So for review, these are items that we've pulled in from the bank feeds, but we haven't posted to QuickBooks yet. So these are all the items we need to review and add. Everything that you've reviewed already will be in the reviewed tab. So if you've clicked add or match or transfer, it's now going to be here in this tab. So I'm just going to add one so you can see what that looks like. And now you see the transaction is there. If you made a mistake, that's okay. It's as simple as clicking undo, and now that transaction goes back to the for review column. You also, if you make a mistake on a transaction, so I'm going to add this uncategorized expense, you also can just click on the transaction itself to edit it. So if I open this transaction up, I can change anything I need to in here. I can change the payee, I can change the expense category, and then just hit save and close. So it's up to you if you want to undo and do it from the bank feed, or just open the individual transaction and make your edits and then save and close. Finally, we have the excluded tab. So we use this primarily if you are importing your transactions from a CSV file, and let's say you oopsed. Let's say that you imported overlapping dates, so you imported a bunch of duplicate transactions. If you do that, from the For Review tab, every transaction that's a duplicate that you don't want, you can click the checkbox here and choose Batch Actions Exclude Selected, and that will put it in the excluded column. So we only do that if it's a duplicate. You would never exclude a transaction that actually cleared your bank account. We would only do that if you made a mistake and pulled in something that you shouldn't. And it's just like the Reviewed tab where it's very easy to go in here and undo that if you made a mistake. So again, very, very easy to undo any mistakes that you may have made and start over. All right, do you guys have any questions so far on the bank feeds, or is that covering in enough detail what you need to know? And you can either chat or unmute, or just give me a thumbs up if you're good. Okay, awesome. All right, so some other ways that we can speed things up are the rules. So you see here at the top, we have this tab for rules. And the rules are just for transactions that are going to be consistent, and we're going to use the same expense category every time. We can create a rule, so QuickBooks will categorize it automatically for us. So here's the example that they use. These aren't real rules, these are just examples, is Starbucks. So for every time something with the bank text Starbucks comes through, you can create a rule to automatically categorize that to meals and entertainment. So you can either come here and click New Rule to create a new rule, or when the transaction comes through the bank feeds, so let's say Bob's Burger Joint, oh, that one already matches to something. Let's pick one that doesn't match. Let's do Laura's Lamination. So if you open the transaction, on the bottom, you can click Create Rule from this transaction. And the nice thing about doing it this way is it pulls in the information for you. So we always have to name the rule. Then you choose whether it applies to money in or money out. Unfortunately, you can't make a rule that applies to both. You have to create two separate rules, one for money in and one for money out, but that's okay. You can also tell it if it only applies to a certain bank or credit card account. So for the rules, you can make it match all or any of the conditions. And so I usually keep it simple, and I just use the description line. And for the description, I want to make sure it's something that will only apply to that vendor. So no other vendor is going to have their bank details say Laura's Lamination unless if they happen to have the same business name. So I use the description as my rule, and then we put in the payee, so that way it always pulls in the correct payee. And again, if the payee doesn't exist already, you can just click Add and make sure that it's a vendor being saved. And then we can tell it what expense category that this needs to go to. And so I'm just going to pick supplies. I'm just picking a random one here. So once we've set the parameters of our rule and then what we want it to do once we've set the rule, You also have the option to auto categorize and auto add. Now, I never use auto add, but if you didn't want to do anything in your books, you could set up all of these rules and have them auto add. And then as soon as they come through the bank feeds, QuickBooks would categorize it for you. You'd never even see it to review. I personally like to manually review just to make sure my rules are working and make sure I don't have something that I have an oversight and it's miscategorizing transactions. So once you save the rule, you will now see a green box for rule. So any transactions that are being categorized based on a rule you set, we'll say rule in that green box. And again, that just helps you add things faster because I know that if I've created a rule, it's probably correct. And so I can quickly go through and add all of the ones that are rule based. The last feature that we need to cover in the bank feeds is receipts. So this part is awesome. If you guys have the mobile app, you can snap a photo of your receipts for QuickBooks and they will upload here. So you can then have the receipts pull up into here and then it will match them with the transaction when it comes through QuickBooks. So QuickBooks is using OCR technology to read the receipts as they come through. So it will read that receipt. It's not great yet. It's in beta testing. Like this is a new feature, but it's decent. So it can read the vendor and it can read the amount and then it'll find the transaction that came through your bank feed and automatically attach that receipt to it. So the receipts would be just like the other transactions. They'd be listed here. You'd be able to click on them. The image would pop up. You'd be able to see where QuickBooks was trying to match the receipt. And if it's wrong, fix it before you click add. I like to use this feature with my clients who do have rental properties because what they do is when they have a receipt for a specific property, they write the property address on the receipt. So then when they snap the photo and it comes in here for me, I can categorize the expense to the correct property. So I highly recommend if you're not doing that already, if you're not tracking those receipts for your properties, to write the property name on the receipt before you upload it here. And then that way you're always sure that you coded it to the right place when it comes through. Okay, so any questions on there, just let me know, but this is a newer feature and it's awesome. So let's do a quick tour now of the menu. So banking is normally where you're going to start getting all your transactions and getting things going, but let's talk about how you actually customize your company. So on the top right-hand corner here, we have a gear icon. And if you click on that, these are all of your basic settings. So if we go into account and settings here, this is where you can customize your business address, put in your logo, add your EIN, things like that. So from company, the company menu, update all of your company information first thing because whatever information is here is what's going to pull through onto the forms that you may or may not send your customers. So if you create invoices for your rental properties and they have the wrong address, this is where you'd go to fix that. So this is where you're going to put in all of your company information. There's also a little tab for usage. Now that QuickBooks Online has advanced, they're trying to force everyone to go that way because it's more expensive. So they've put usage limits on things like your chart of accounts. So it will tell you how many accounts you're using out of what you're allowed. And so if you see you're approaching that limit, you may want to go clean up your chart of accounts so you don't get pushed into the next level of QuickBooks. Under the sales menu, this is where you can customize some preferences. So if you do create invoices, if you want those default terms to be due on receipt instead of net 30, you can come in here. Again, the pencil icon is always how we edit. And then you can change any of these items that you would like to change. You can add things like service date or a deposit and save those changes so it shows up on the sales receipts. You can turn on SKUs if you sell products or services. Another one that's new and interesting is late fees. So if you've invoiced a client and they haven't paid by the due date, you can set up in here for it to automatically apply a late fee to the invoice. So you don't have to manually go in and add late fees when they haven't paid. So that's kind of a cool feature. You can use progress invoicing. Again, this typically applies if you're in more of a construction industry. So if you have a huge estimate that you create for a customer and you need to invoice them periodically, you can turn on this progress invoicing and then create multiple invoices from a single estimate. If you are sending forms from QuickBooks to customers, so if you're sending out invoices, for example, this is where you go to change the message that automatically is generated with that email. So you can customize this here. I always add a link to my calendar. I add a pitch for additional services that I offer. So I make this message count for something. I don't just send a generic message of here's your invoice. So I feel like use every opportunity you can there to connect with your clients and let them know what else you can be doing. We also can customize our expense settings. So if you want to make expenses and items billable, for example, if I have rental properties and I want to make sure that I invoice my tenant for utilities, so maybe they don't get utilities, but we pay them, then I can turn on this feature. And when that utility expense comes through my bank feed, I can say, hey, assign it to this tenant at this property. And when I create the invoice for that tenant, I can attach that expense and add it as a line to the invoice. So if you are billing any of your tenants directly for any items, that's a great feature to turn on. Okay, and then under advanced, this is some of the funkier settings. So if your fiscal year is not starting on January, this is where you'd go to change that. If you want to have it default to cash instead of accrual, you can change that here. If you want to use the close the book setting, which is a good setting to have turned on, it basically gives you a warning message if you're about to make a change to a period that's been closed. So like if you've already done your 2018 tax returns, you might close the books on 12/31/2018, and this will make sure that you don't accidentally record a transaction that affects that period without giving you a warning first to let you know, hey, you're about to do something you shouldn't. If you are using Plus, so like I mentioned, for you guys, we can customize the chart of accounts to run those rental properties. But if you wanted to use classes instead, you'd need a Plus account, and then you can turn on classes and locations. The difference between classes and locations is that you can apply multiple classes to a single transaction. So you get one class per line item. So if you have 10 items that you paid on your personal account and you're journaling those into QuickBooks and you want to say all these different properties that each of those are for, classes would work better for you than locations. You get one location per transaction. So locations works well if it's a single sales receipt or a single invoice or bill, then you can assign a location to that entire bill. Another thing that I always come in and turn off immediately when I start up a new QuickBooks Online account is these automatic options. So I do not like QuickBooks to pre-fill forms for me with previously entered content, because almost never am I going to enter the exact same bill over and over and over again. So it's really, I find it really irritating when it pulls through what I've entered previously, and then I have to sit there and delete everything before I enter in the new bill or get confused and misalign. So I turn this off. You can just click on the pencil icon and just uncheck the box and then hit save. I also, I turn off automatically applying credits and automatically applying bill payments. The reason I do that is because I want my books to match my vendor or my customer. So if my vendor, if I tell them that I am applying a vendor credit to a certain invoice, I want them to be able to record the same thing. If I don't turn off this automatic feature, QuickBooks will just apply it to the oldest one. And so that may not be what I'm doing. I may want to apply it to the invoice that it relates to, so I turn that off. Okay, so these are your basic settings. Again, if you have any questions, let me know, but this is where you're going to go to find all of those options to customize. And I'm just going to look over here on this side screen. I have all of our notes about what to do. So I want to make sure that I cover everything. Okay, if you guys have any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, we'll just continue our tour down the menu. So the next menu item that we'll cover is expenses. What you'll notice with QuickBooks is that you can hover over the menus and then these additional tabs will pop up. That's just to save you time. If you know that you're trying to get to your vendor menu as opposed to your expenses menu, you can hover and then click. Or if you just click on the menu item, those are your tabs that are available. So whatever items pop up on the side, they're also just listed as tabs at the top. If you click on expenses, this is just going to list your recent expense transactions all in a list. So I don't use this for much. For me personally, it doesn't add any value, but you may want to go to your vendor center. So your vendor center is going to have this cool little toolbar here, which shows you the things that you have outstanding. So if you have overdue bills, they're going to be listed right here. You can click to see the details. So if I click on open bills, it shows me all 5 of my open bills so I can see the details. And it shows me bills that I've paid recently. I'm going to click on a vendor to go to the vendor center. So if I click on this vendor, I can see all of the transactions related to that vendor from the transaction list. If I click on vendor details, I can see all the details that I have entered for this vendor. So again, we created this vendor and we didn't put any information in, so that's why all of these are blank. If you want to see all of your vendors, click on this little arrow 3-line icon, and that will just pop it out so you can have your list of vendors here if you want to bounce between them or look at different things. So from the vendor center, we can do a lot of different things. If you click on new transaction, this is where you can enter in a bill, an expense, or a check. And so before we go too much further, let's talk about the difference between a bill, an expense, and a check. So in QuickBooks Online, you only enter a bill if it's something that you're going to pay at a later date. So a bill, if you've already paid it, do not use a bill. A bill is something we're paying later. Typically, clients who use this are printing checks out of QuickBooks. So they're entering in all their bills, and then twice a month, maybe they're going in and they're clicking to pay bills and print checks. So if you're not doing that, don't enter transactions as bills. An expense is used if you've already paid for it. So if you're recording things after they've happened in QuickBooks, and you've already paid for something, it's already hit your bank account, that's going to be an expense transaction. And then a check is basically the same thing as an expense transaction, only it means that you actually paid by check. And so you want to use the check form because then you get to put in a check number. So if you actually wrote a check, make sure to use check. If it was auto drafted or a wire or something, then use expense, and then only use bill if it's something you're paying later. Okay, a purchase order, you might use those if you're purchasing something from a vendor. You might create a purchase order first, and then they fulfill the order and they send you a bill, and you can convert that purchase order to a bill. That's probably not very relevant for a rental property company, but some clients will need that. A vendor credit is if you have a vendor that you have an account with, and you're going to make purchases in the future, and so they've given you a credit on a past purchase that will be applied to a future purchase. That's when you use vendor credit. If they're going to refund you, do not use vendor credit. Instead, when the refund comes through the bank account, you're going to record whatever expense account you use to record the initial transaction, you're going to record the refund to that same transaction, that same expense account. So that's the difference between a credit and a refund. Credit, you're going to use it in the future. A refund is I'm not doing business with you, give me my money back. Okay, so if there's no questions on that, I'll just go ahead and walk you through really quickly how to enter a bill. So from new transaction, if I click on bill, you'll notice most of the forms in QuickBooks look almost exactly the same. So they'll say which form you're in here at the top. They'll have a name that needs to be entered. So whether it's a vendor or a customer, that's going to be listed right here. And then the address is going to pull through from however you set up the vendor or customer. It's important to note that if you change the address here, so let's say I added in their address, that doesn't automatically update the vendor. So if you have a mistake and you need to fix the address, do it from the vendor. So click on the vendor and click edit. Don't do it from the form, because on the form, you're only updating this one form. So the terms are the payment terms. So for this bill, the vendor will tell you what your terms are. It'll say right on the bill, but maybe it's net 30, which means it's due in 30 days. You'll enter in whatever date is on the bill, and notice that my due date will automatically adjust based on the terms. So if I enter terms of net 30, it automatically changes my due date. The bill number, again, will be on the bill. So whatever number they have on that bill, you want to type it in here. It's important to always put in a bill number, so that way if you ever have issues on your account, you can more easily trace back exactly what happened and say, I paid bill number this with check number that. Otherwise, it can be a big mess, especially if they send you multiple bills for the same amount. Now, when you enter a bill, you have to break it out into the expense categories. So if you click the drop-down arrow, we can see all of our expense categories here. So let's say I'm entering in this A1 rental backhoe. I'm entering in a bill for them. And I know that when I purchase things from A1, it's equipment rental. So I can type to pull up the account name faster, or you can always just click and scroll. So if I click the expense account that I want, I can type in the description here. So usually there will be something on the bill, or I might have, what I was renting this for. Whatever will help you remember why you made the purchase, that's what you want to put in the description. So pretend that you have a terrible memory, and if someone asks you a question about the transaction, the description is what's going to tell you what you need to know. You enter the amount straight off of the bill. So whatever the bill amount is, we're going to put that in here. If this is a bill that you're going to turn around and pass through to a customer, you can mark it billable and put in the customer name. And so by doing that, when you go to invoice that customer, this expense will now be sitting there on the side for you to click and add it right to the invoice. So I'm going to leave that on there so we can demonstrate that later. If you have a copy of the bill, so they've sent you an invoice or they've emailed you an invoice, I recommend attach everything. So attach that invoice. You can just drag and drop it right here into the attachments. It'll save you trouble later if you have questions on the transaction to be able to just pull up the source document right there. Okay. You also will notice I want to cover the bottom menu items here. So cancel or the X works the same. So if we start doing the transaction and realize that we don't want to, you can just hit cancel or hit the X. Clear will undo everything you've typed in. So if you've made a mistake, or maybe you have that, you forgot to turn off that autofill and it's annoying you, come down here and click clear and that'll take everything out. You can also make recurring. So if you have, let's say, using the rental properties as an example, you have a loan on the property that's going to be the same amount every single month, you could make this bill recurring. That way you don't forget about it. So if we click make recurring, what we can do is we can say scheduled reminder or unscheduled. Scheduled means it'll automatically create the bill when you tell it to. Reminder means it'll remind you, hey, you probably want to create this bill, and it'll give you a little reminder message. Or unscheduled means that you're creating a template that you're not going to use or be reminded of, but you can, when you're ready to use it, you can go in and just use it then. So it's not something that's automatic. It's more like maybe we use it once in a while. A good example would be when you purchase a property and you have the big HUD statement and you want to enter in all those transactions and it's going to be the similar line items every time, you might create an unscheduled transaction that you can just use whenever you buy a new building. So you're going to choose the vendor and then you choose the interval. So if it repeats monthly, you can say on a certain day of the month. You can choose weekly and choose a certain day of the week, whatever you'd like to do. Put in a start and end date, review that everything here makes sense, and then save the template. So that will just allow you to automatically enter transactions. So again, things that people might forget, like paying rent, those are great ones to automate and make recurring. Okay, so do you have any questions on expenses or bills, anything that you guys would like to see covered in more detail? If not, give me a thumbs up and we'll just keep going. All right, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so our next menu is sales, and there's more items under sales than there are under expenses. And by the way, these keep changing. So what's here one day may be different the next, but that's okay. So I don't use the overview for the sales module personally, but if you need to, it's there. Instead, if we click on all sales, this is similar to the expenses menu. It's just going to list everything that's happened. And again, you have this cool bar where you can filter out like, oh, here are the items where I've tracked time, but I haven't billed it, or I haven't billed the expense. I can see all of my overdue invoices or my open invoices. So it's awesome. And then it helps you filter out the items that are probably most useful for you. So if we click on invoices, again, this one's just going to show us our invoices. So if we have invoices out to customers, it's kind of cool because you can see whether you remember to send the invoice, whether you whether it's been deposited and paid. And then another cool thing about invoices, if I click on this to pull up the detail, that only happens when I'm demonstrating. Well, if you open an invoice in QuickBooks Online and you scroll down, you can see if they've opened it, if they've viewed it, how many times they've viewed it. So if you're working with a customer who's like, oh, I never got it, well, you actually will know whether they got it or not and whether they opened it. So it's a very cool tool. I like that part. The Customer Center, again, is laid out very similar to the same way that the Vendor Center is laid out. So again, we have this cool bar for things that they think will be useful to you. You can click on one of your customers to go to the detail. If we click the arrow and the 3 bars, we can see all of our other customers, so we can bounce around between them. You can sort them by name or open balance. So this can be useful if you want to see which customers owe you money and then drill into the specific details of what they owe you. Just like the layout for the Vendor Center, you can click on this drop-down arrow and see the new transaction types that you have available. So for customers, we need to talk about the difference between an invoice and a sales receipt. So an invoice is if you're sending them something that they're going to pay later. So if they have an account, you send an invoice. If you've already collected the money, but you still want to associate the transaction with the customer, then you use a sales receipt. So that's the difference between the two forms. And it matters because if you create an invoice in QuickBooks, when the customer pays, you have to come in and create a payment. So QuickBooks will not automatically know that that client paid, especially if the amount that they paid isn't exactly what the invoice is. So if they paid multiple invoices, or if you get multiple payments from customers on the same day, it doesn't know that. So if you've created an invoice for a customer, you need to click payment, or you can click on the specific invoice and click receive payment. So let's say that this customer has paid. You want to choose the payment date. You want to choose the payment method. So that could be a check. They could have paid cash, a credit card, whatever. So put in the payment method. If they paid by check, put in their check number. And this is the most important part, deposit to undeposited funds. So if you don't fix this, if you don't code this to undeposited funds, QuickBooks will try to post it right to your checking account. Now that's fine if you only ever do a single deposit. So if you only ever deposit one check at a time, every single time, then it's really not a big deal that QuickBooks puts it to your checking account because it's going to match when it comes to the bank feed. But most people deposit a couple of items together. Maybe you save up a couple checks and go to the bank at once. So just to save myself any hassle, either way, it doesn't hurt to use undeposited funds. So I deposit every single customer payment to undeposited funds, verify the amount received, and then which invoice it applies to. So if the customer only makes a partial payment, type in the actual amount of the payment and see how it updated my payment amount on the invoice. So if they're paying $250 on multiple invoices, again, you can just type in these numbers, how much they're paying on each invoice to get that up. So then I'm going to hit save and close on this one. So I've created a partial payment for this customer and I've posted that to undeposited funds. I'm going to do one more so that way I can demonstrate the deposit better. So I'm just picking another client with a balance here and I'm going to click on receive payment again. I'm going to assume that they paid by a check. I'm going to put in their check number and again, deposited to undeposited funds. This time I'm going to assume they're paying their full invoice. The invoice amount is correct. So save and close. So once you've received those customer payments, you have one more step to do, and that's the bank deposit. And this is basically creating a deposit slip in QuickBooks. So if I click on new up here on the left, click on bank deposit, all of those transactions that I've recorded to undeposited funds are now listed here. So what I can do is I can say, what bank account am I taking my deposit to? Oh, I'm depositing to my checking account. I'm making my deposit on 2/1, and I have 2 checks from 2/1 that I'm taking to the bank. So click off the payments that make up your deposit slip. So you can think of this as, if I was handwriting a deposit slip, I'd list out which checks and the amounts. That's the same thing we're doing here. Then there's a total deposit amount to make sure that this amount is correct. It's my $500 plus $629.10, and then you can hit save and close. So the key thing here is that their bank deposit must match the amount that's going to come through the bank feed center. The reason why is if it doesn't match exactly, so if your bank messes up and they deposit 112909 instead of 112910, QuickBooks will not think they're the same. So as it comes through your bank feeds, you want to make sure that it's matching and that you don't add the transaction. So that takes us to the most common mistake that I see small business owners make in QuickBooks is that in the bank feed center, a deposit comes through. For example, you know that that's your rental income. And so instead of thinking it through and saying, hey, I've already posted that in QuickBooks, this should be matching, they see it come through here and they click add instead of match. So a deposit that you've posted should look more like this. It should say match. It should not say add like this one. Does that make sense? So you just don't want to duplicate those transactions. Okay, so now I'm going to cover the chart of accounts because I think this is the other area that a lot of clients have questions about. So to get to your chart of accounts, we scroll down this menu item here and under accounting, go to chart of accounts. There's always a little thing that you have to click to get through the first time, and then after that it won't be there. So the chart of accounts is just the listing of all the buckets that you could be recording transactions into. So if you need to make changes to an account, you can find it here in your chart of accounts. And let's say that we want to change, you know, this loan payable. We want to be more specific. So if I click the drop down arrow, I can just click on edit. So for a rental property, I never just put loan payable. I want to put which property it applies to or the last 4 digits of the loan, anything that will make it easy for me to tell when I look at my financial statements, which loan is that. It also makes it easier when you go to reconcile that you're able to say, oh yeah, that's that loan and it matches this loan statement. So I might make this loan payable 123 Deinhardt. And if I had a loan statement, I might add the, you know, the last 4 digits of the loan account. So again, making everything as simple as possible to tie together. So then once you make the changes you'd like to make, you can hit save and close. Let's say that I've accidentally created duplicate accounts. So I'm going to find, let's do for automobile and fuel. So let's say that I create a new expense account. So I clicked on new and I'm going to choose an expense. And I'm going to choose auto because I'm going to duplicate my fuel account. So in this case, let's say I wasn't thinking and I created gas, right? Both could be reasonable names for fuel. So now I have 2 accounts that are essentially trying to record the exact same thing. So if I want to merge those 2 accounts, what you're going to do, choose the account that you want to keep. So if I want to keep fuel, I want it to absorb the expense account gas. Look at the fuel account. You're going to have to copy the name exactly. So if it's a longer name, I might just open it up, copy it, like literally hit Command C or Control C, depending on if you're a Mac or a PC. Make sure you know the type and the detail type because those have to be the exact same to merge. So now I'm going to search for gas, the account that I know I want to merge. Click the drop down arrow and click edit. I'm going to change it to fuel, which is the same name as the other one. The account type is still an expense. The detail type is still auto. When I click save and close, it should ask me, one of them is a sub account. Okay, so the one that we want to keep is a sub account of automobile. So every single detail has to be exactly the same for it to merge. So now I'm going to open up this one here, click edit, mark is a sub account of auto. And now when I hit save and close, it should warn me, hey, you're already using that name. Would you like to merge the 2? To which I'm going to say yes. And now every transaction that was recorded in gas has now been absorbed into fuel, and now there's just 1 account. So that's how you merge an account. It works the exact same way for customers and vendors, by the way. So if you accidentally duplicate a customer, which happens a lot if, you know, maybe you have their personal name and then you have their business name and you realize it all needs to be 1, same thing. For whichever one you want to keep, copy and paste that name exactly, go to the one you want to merge or absorb, paste in the name, make sure all the details match, and then when you merge it, that one gets absorbed into the other one. And that's important because sometimes you'll have one vendor where you've entered in all the information, and so if you do it the wrong direction, you now have to re-enter in all the vendor information because literally the one that you do is going to be absorbed into the other one. Okay. If you want to add a new account, granted, you can add it from just about any screen, but you can also come to your chart of accounts here and click new. If you have an existing chart of accounts that you want to import, you can click this drop-down arrow by new and import from a CSV file. And the cool thing is if you don't know how to format that file, when you click on import, you can download a sample file here. So if you do want to import a chart of accounts that you already have, you can download the sample file to see what your file structure needs to look like, then paste all your information into it, and then import that into QuickBooks. Okay, so if you wanted to add account numbers to your chart of accounts, again, you would do that from going to the gear icon, account and settings, and you'd have to turn on that feature. But let's say you had all the account numbers and you wanted to edit the account numbers and edit account names, and you want to do a bunch of them at once. If you click on the pencil icon, which is our edit button, you can batch edit things. So if you have a bunch of issues with your chart of account names, you can click that, make all the changes that you want to make. So type in everything you want to make and then hit save. And so that allows you to edit a bunch of them at one time instead of opening each one and editing. All right, so We have created the new accounts and sub-accounts. We've edited an account. We've deleted, okay, deleting an account. Let's say we have an account that we don't need and we don't want. There are certain default accounts that QuickBooks creates that it will not let you delete, but it'll tell you that when you go to do it. So for example, the uncategorized income, uncategorized expense, QuickBooks won't let you mess with those because those are their default account that they use when, for example, when you don't know where to put it. So you can't change those, but other accounts, especially the ones you create, can always be changed. So let's say that we want to make pest control services inactive for some reason. If you click the drop-down arrow, you can click make inactive. That is as close as you can get to deleting a transaction. So QuickBooks Online doesn't actually let you delete anything. It will just make them inactive, and so they won't show up in your list anymore when you're searching for a vendor or an account to use. They just won't be there. Now you can click on the gear icon. Oops, wrong one, scroll up. Click on the gear icon here. And if you want to see your inactive accounts, click on include inactive, and now those inactive accounts will be listed. And I think for pest control, so we just have the income account. I feel like we just made inactive the one. Maybe I didn't hit save. So when you make them inactive, they should say in parentheses deleted. And so that can be kind of irritating because if you make an account inactive that you did use on prior year's financial statements, if you go back and you run, let's say you used it in 2018, we deleted it in 2019. When you run the 2018 statements, it'll show the account and it'll say deleted in parentheses. So that is the only downside to the way that this system works, as opposed to merging it or doing something else with the account. But you may run into the situation where you just need to. You might need to make it inactive so that way you don't go over your 250 account limit. And so it just means that those historical statements, it's a little irritating. It'll say deleted in parentheses. Same with your customers and your vendors. They're never really gone. They'll say deleted in parentheses. Okay, so let's talk about, and I have two screens, that's why I'm looking this way. Just making sure that I've covered everything that we had listed on the outline for the course. So we've received a customer payment, we've paid a bill. So let's talk about how to reconcile the accounts. So this is one of the most important steps to make sure that you don't have mistakes in the transactions that are pulled into QuickBooks or things that were missed and weren't pulled in. So to reconcile an account, you're going to click on the gear icon on the top right and click reconcile. And in order to reconcile, you need to pull the bank statement. So you'll take your bank statement and we're going to compare the bank statement to what's been posted in QuickBooks. And again, you're going to have a lot of helpful messages the first time you do it, but just click the box for don't show again and then click X, and then you won't have to deal with those every single time. Okay, so to reconcile an account, which you should be doing this every single month. So for every bank, credit card, loan statement that you have, if you can get a statement for a car loan statement, you want to reconcile that account every month. This is the fastest way to catch if you have any issues. So to reconcile the account, you select which account you want to reconcile from the drop-down. So let's say we're reconciling the checking account. You'll have that checking statement in front of you. Make sure that the beginning balance right here matches the beginning balance on your statement. Then your statement will have an ending balance. So whatever the ending balance is on your statement, you're going to type that in here. And then whatever the ending date of your statement is, you're going to type that in this field. So let's say this is January 31st that we're reconciling. Then you click on Start Reconciling. QuickBooks Online will have check marks already if there are any items that were entered from the bank feed. So when you enter it from the bank feed, it's going to automatically check the box here in QuickBooks. So these items here that have check boxes, those were entered from the bank feed. And you can also tell that because of this green little double square. So the green little double square means this came through from your bank feed. It also shows what date it cleared the bank account. So that can be really helpful. If you're entering every single transaction from the bank feed and you're not manually entering anything, then this reconciliation takes about 2 seconds because all the items that cleared the bank account already have check boxes, and so you're done. But what you're going to do is for every item on your bank statement, you're checking the box in QuickBooks. So if my bank statement has a deposit of $337.50 on this date, then I click the box. Once you've clicked all the boxes that are on your statement, and then make sure that anything that's not on your statement is unclicked. So if for some reason a box is clicked that shouldn't be, you just unclick it by checking it again. Once you've clicked every box that's on your statement, this difference amount should be 0, because literally you're just matching what was cleared on the bank account to what's in QuickBooks. So if there's a transaction that's on your bank statement that's not in your list, it means you're missing a transaction and you need to go back to the bank feeds and either add the transaction there or add it from the ledger if it for some reason didn't pull through. When you're done with this, so this will say 0 and this box will change from save for later to finish now. When you're done with the reconciliation, any items that are left in here are uncleared transactions. So you want to review those to see why didn't they clear. If you enter every single transaction from the bank feed, then every single transaction should clear. So that means that if there's things sitting here, they're probably duplicates that imported. And so if it's a duplicate, we want to get that out of there. If there are checks that you've written that are sitting here uncleared, that means that your vendor probably hasn't cashed the check. So you need to see, do I need to reissue this check? How old is this check? Or is it going to clear next month? So if you wrote the check January 29th, well, then it shouldn't be surprising that it's sitting there uncleared when you are reconciling through January 31st. But if it's older than that, you may need to follow up with your vendor and see if you need to reissue the check. Maybe they never received it. To make this easier, you can just do payments first and then just do deposits if you'd like. So if you don't like the way that it's laid out, you can make it a little bit easier by focusing first on payments and then focusing on deposits. You also have your little gear icon here to where you can filter the columns if you'd like to see them different. And then this arrow always means collapse. So if you want to collapse that so you can see more of your transactions on the screen, that's how you would do that. So again, if someone before you has made a mistake, they might click finish now, even though the difference isn't 0. That means they didn't really reconcile. Like, that is a mistake. So if they do that, here's how you can see it. So I'm going to hit add adjustment and finish. So I'm a lazy bookkeeper. I'm coming in here. I'm not really doing my job. I'm making a hot mess in your books. Here's how you can find that. On your profit and loss report. So if we click reports, the most common reports have little stars and they're always here at the top. So if there are other reports that you find that you like, you can just click the little star and that will move it up here for you to your favorites, just to make that easier. So I'm going to click on profit and loss to run the P&L report, and I need to be looking at January 2020 because that's the reconciliation date that I just did. So your profit and loss report shows your income minus all of your expenses to give you net income. So here's all of my income accounts that we have for this vendor, minus all of the expenses that we have. And down here at the bottom is our net income figure. Now notice down here under other expenses, we have reconciliation discrepancies. So if you do hire a bookkeeper, watch for this. Make sure that this does not ever show up on your P&L because it means that they didn't actually reconcile the account. Now, the only time that you may see something like this is if you hire a bookkeeper and you just want to start on 1/1/2019, but you have years of messed up data prior to that. They might do a reconciliation to get your balance right on day 1, and then just, if you're not using your historical statements for anything and for some reason you pulled in all the stuff, that would probably be the only time that I would see reconciliation discrepancies and say, okay, that's, you know, if that's what you agreed to, you didn't want them to go back and fix those prior years, then that's the way it has to be. So, okay, so here's what your P&L looks like. Things that I look for that indicate errors are uncategorized anything. So when I see an uncategorized expense, you can click on any item that turns blue to see the details. And so for example, I can see that this is Amazon. If I click on the transaction, I can edit it right here. So I know Amazon shouldn't be uncategorized because that's no such thing. So if this is software, usually they have a category that's something like office supplies or office expenses and software, whatever category they want to use. You can put in the correct category, save and close, and now it will not be listed here. There we go, on my report in QuickBooks Online. So it's as easy as that to recategorize and fix transactions. So the reports that you should be running as a small business owner every month are definitely your profit and loss report. So first you enter all the transactions from the bank feeds, then you reconcile all of your accounts, and now we come to the P&L and make sure everything looks good. My favorite way to run a profit and loss report is by month. So I'm gonna pretend that your business started in September of 2019. We're going to look through 131 because we only want to look at periods that have been finished. Under display columns by, I'm going to change this to months. Then click run report. I love looking at my financials this way, especially with rentals, because then I can see my income month over month, and knowing that my rental properties should have the same rental income every single time, I can see if I'm missing something, if a payment didn't come through, if it's in the wrong month or whatever. So this is a great way to analyze your income and your expenses month over month. Now, we had created and entered some property expense transactions. I think we entered some. Maybe we didn't categorize anything to those. So I'm going to add some so you can see what those parent and sub accounts look like really quick. So in QuickBooks, one thing that's not as cool as the desktop version is that you have to open new tabs if you don't want to constantly have to rerun reports or redo a window. So if you hold down the control key and then click on whatever menu option you want, it will open it in a new tab. So I held down control and clicked on banking, and now I'm opening banking in another tab. And I'm doing this just to create some fictitious entries really quick. So I am just going to add all of these because I want to show the revenue categories that I made and how it's going to look for you. Do a batch action, modify. Then I'm going to refresh my report by clicking run report. And unfortunately, they have a lot of transactions here, so pretend all these other items aren't here to see what it'd look like for you, but see how I have rental income as a parent account, and then I have each of my properties as a sub account. So I can see my rental income for 123 Dinehart Lane right here for January. I'm going to do the search because there's a lot of transactions. If I want to see my expenses for 123 Dinehart Lane, see how I made a parent account, so there should be no transactions recorded to the parent account. And then each category that I want to track will be a sub account. So that could be utilities, if you pay internet, if you pay water, sewer, trash, whatever, you can break each of those out as sub accounts. If you have a mortgage on the property or HOA fees, again, I make all of those as sub accounts under my property parent account. And then the cool thing, and I'm not sure if I can do this in the demo file, so we'll see, is you can customize that report. So I am going to filter my report, and I only want to show my 1, 2, 3, I'm trying to see where I am here, my 1, 2, 3 income. There's a lot of accounts in this one. So rental income, 123 Dinehart Lane, and then my 123 Dinehart expenses. So then I can run this report, and now it's basically creating a P&L by property. So I love doing that personally, and this is the reason why I use the chart of accounts this way instead of classes. If I used classes, I couldn't run it month over month. So when you use classes, these columns are for each class, so each property would have been a column. So if you like to see it that way, that's fine, and you would need a Plus subscription to do that. But this is how I personally look at my own rental properties, as I run them, so I can look at them month over month and then by property if I would like to. Okay, so we've covered reconciliations, we've covered the chart of accounts, and now we're covering the report. So this is the profit and loss report. I'm going to also show you the balance sheet. So if I click on reports and choose balance sheet now, so the balance sheet shows our assets, liabilities, and owner's equity. Assets are what you own, liabilities are what you owe, and your equity is the difference between those two. So the balance sheet's going to show all of my bank and checking accounts, my accounts receivable, which is money customers owe me, if I have inventory, if I have undeposited funds that I haven't yet posted the deposit and taken it to the bank. It's going to show if I've purchased things like a truck at historical cost. Your bills will be listed at the bottom, your credit cards, any other liabilities that you have. And then your equity and your retained earnings are down here at the bottom. So for the balance sheet, for those of you who own, for example, rental properties, what you're checking here is, are all of my properties listed? Are all of my loans listed? Make sure that I have the full picture. It can get a little tricky if you are purchasing those properties personally and not through your business. So you just want to make sure that you don't duplicate anything. So if you're putting all the mortgages on your business books, just make sure that you don't double deduct the mortgage interest when that comes time for your tax return. So, but personally, a lot of people like to see all of their properties, even if they are personally owned and they're managing them through their through their business. And so you could do that if you want to put those loan payments on here. And then it's important to note that the loan payments are on the balance sheet. So if you finance the property, the loan payment goes on the balance sheet. The only piece that can hit your profit and loss report is the interest expense. So a loan payment is not an expense. It is just financing the asset. So it's not an expense on your P&L. All right, so do you guys have, we got about half an hour available if you guys have some questions for me, anything that you specifically needed to see addressed that wasn't covered. Now's the time to go ahead, unmute yourself. Just let me know if there's anything else I can cover for you here in QuickBooks.
Could you go over how to upload receipts again and what section that's in?
Yeah, so if you click on banking, then you have to download the app on your phone. So you have to go, have a smartphone, you go to the App Store, download the app on your phone, and it will prompt you to, it'll show you how to upload the receipts, like take the picture. And then in QuickBooks, it's here in banking under the receipts tab.
Okay.
So
now,
once you've uploaded receipts, they'll be listed here as transactions.
Okay, so you mentioned a lot about checks, paying with checks, but we don't really use checks. We use Venmo a lot.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, how do you create a receipt with Venmo? Can you just screenshot the payment on your phone and use that as a receipt?
So if that's the best that you can do to get the image, then do it. Absolutely. I don't know, personally, I don't know about Venmo if they create any good reports that you could use to upload. Now, the thing about Venmo is that when those transactions come through the bank feed, they won't have any information that's relevant. They will just say Venmo.
Right.
I personally, if it doesn't make any difference to you, like PayPal, you can actually connect PayPal just like a bank account. And the nice thing about PayPal is it'll pull in all the details. There may be an app for Venmo. I just don't know about it. So, because they're very similar. So I would think that maybe you could connect Venmo the same way, but maybe not. So if you do use Venmo, you will have to then go into Venmo to get all of the details for when you post a transaction. So like I have a lot of clients who do use Venmo. They have to send me a report showing, hey, every Venmo transaction, here's the details. And then I have to go in and update all the transactions in QuickBooks because otherwise they'll just say Venmo. That's all that comes through.
I guess what I'm saying is, you know, for tax purposes, if I got audited, would that screenshot be an appropriate receipt?
So I am not a tax preparer. So I am not, you know, I can't tell you what your liability would be. But if that's the best that you can get, if that's the only documentation that they provide you, I would save those and I would attach them just in case. And then consult, you know, I'd confirm with legal counsel or your tax preparer, hey, what do I need to do to mitigate my liability here?
Okay, and then another question. Should I only be uploading my bank accounts that are associated with the rental properties or my personal checking accounts? Would I be, yeah.
Business only.
Okay.
Business only. So I don't know, have you set up like a separate LLC for your business?
Yes.
Okay, so I use one QuickBooks Online account for every legal entity. So an LLC is a separate entity. So I'd set up a QuickBooks Online file for that LLC. I would only connect my business, banking, and checking accounts to QuickBooks. And then, because the whole point of setting up an LLC is to protect yourself. So if you're intermingling business and personal, you're losing that protection. You're defeating the purpose. So set up separate business accounts and then try not to ever use personal funds for business or business funds for personal. And then if you accidentally do, either make them a loan and pay them back or code it to your owner's equity account. But yeah, in QuickBooks Online, for your business, you should just be connecting your business accounts.
Are you saying one QuickBooks account for each property? Because
do you have a separate LLC for each property?
Yes.
So normally I would say yes. I would consult in your case because you guys own it together, right? You don't have any partners.
It's just us, yeah.
Okay, so I would consult with your tax preparer. You might be able to get away with having one file even though you have separate LLCs, just because all of your LLCs are going to roll through to your personal tax return that you share anyways. So right. It may not be a big deal for you guys, but for other clients where they have a separate LLC and they have different ownership structures for those different LLCs, you absolutely need a completely separate QuickBooks Online file. The balance sheet does not handle breaking apart into multiple entities well. So that's the main problem. Like, it's easy for us to run the P&Ls by different LLC, no problem, because we have tools to filter and categorize, but the balance sheet does not split up nicely between various LLCs. Do you have separate bank accounts for each LLC?
Yes.
Okay, so that makes it a little bit better, but yeah, so I would confirm, because it can get expensive to set up separate QuickBooks Online files for each LLC. But again, if the reason is protection of assets, and that's why you have separate LLCs, then you may need to set up separate QuickBooks Online files just to show everything is totally and completely separate. So if something happens to property A, they can't come after me for properties B, C, and D. And again, consult legal counsel, that's just general information. I'm not an attorney, so I can't, guarantee what will or will not work for you, but that would be my advice. And then, so if you can find yourself a pro advisor, not only do we get 50% off, but we get multi-company discounts. So like if I have a new client that I bring on who doesn't have an existing QBO file, if I know that they need 5 company files, I can get the first one at half off and each additional company at $5 per month for the next 5 years. So it's not a lifetime discount, it's a 5-year multi-company discount, but it can be worth it. Now the catch is that you have to set up all 5 at once, or however many. So if you have 10 company files, set them all up at once. If you add an LLC later, they won't let you add it on for $5. You have to start a new multi-company deal and get the first one at 50% off, and then each additional one that you set up at that time at $5 per month. So there are some options for you if your tax preparer says, yeah, you should keep these separately. Then you should be able, if they have a pro advisor account, they can get you that multi-company discount.
Okay. And one other question, the Quicken, do you know Quicken at all?
Not even a little bit.
Okay. I just wondered what the difference was between Quicken and the one that you're going to recommend for me. I didn't know, like, what can the QuickBooks do more than the Quicken does?
Yeah, I am not sure because I haven't used Quicken. So
Okay.
I use QuickBooks Online exclusively. I like it because of all the integrations that it has, the way it pulls in everything automatically, the rules and everything like that. And the app works well for clients. So if they're creating invoices and doing things, if you don't need that functionality, you might be fine with Quicken. Again, I don't know because I don't use Quicken, but now at least you've seen what QuickBooks can do, and then maybe what you can do is go do some research on Quicken and see, hey, can I do the things that I need to do in here based on what I just learned today?
Okay.
Helpful. Yeah, I just have never used Quicken, so I don't know. All right, do you have any other questions for me?
Rex, unmute yourself. You're muted. There you go.
I'm good. I'm good.
We're good? Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that was helpful for you guys. And hopefully, at least some of the concepts should be the same or similar in Quicken as QuickBooks Online. So if it ends up that it doesn't make sense for you to switch. But from my understanding, Quicken is more for personal and not for businesses. But again, it just depends. If you're not entering bills and doing some of the other things that you need to do in QuickBooks Online, then maybe it'll work for you. So.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining today. And if you do have any follow-up questions, go ahead and send those to Kim and she'll forward those on to me. So that way we can make sure that, you got all your questions answered today.
I'm sure we probably will.
Perfect.
This has been a good introduction. I'm sure I'm going to need a lot more practice.
Well, hey,
A lot of information.
The link will be in the recording. It is a lot of information. It is 2 hours or an hour and a half of, just putting it all out there, but then you have the recording so you can kind of go back later when things.
How do we get to the recording again?
What?
How do we get to the recording again?
Kim will send out a link for that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't work for the SBDC, so I'm at home just zoomed in like the rest of you, and then so somehow she's recording it on her end, and then we'll send out the link to all of you guys. So all right, well, I am going to see if I can figure out how to, so I've stopped the share now. So then I think we all just click leave meeting, and then she should still be logged in to go ahead and record the session and send that to you. So, awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.